Hi, I'm Rick.
Hi, I'm Oscar.
So, Oscar, today you wanted to show us a little bit about Azure Pipelines, right?
Yes. Well, Rick, today is a bit different. It's from home.
Yep.
So we'll have to get used to our software and doing the organization ourselves. But I want to go straight into the screen. So I'm going to show my browser. I'm going to go into Azure DevOps Pipelines. Pipelines have been around for a while, since, I don't know, maybe 2 years. We went to primarily YAML for builds. We still have the release pipelines in there. But today I wanted to show actually specifically multi-stage release pipelines. So actually building your app and releasing your app and having some control there. So if you go into repository, and in this case, I have a simple app with a startup, just out of the box, .NET Core, .NET New Web App, and Go. So if you're in your repository, you can set up a build by clicking up Set Up Build. The pipeline that gets created then is whatever you want. I think, I used to have the classic mode here as well. Looks like that's gone now.
Yeah, and of course, we used to have builds and releases on the left under pipelines, right?
Yeah, and now it's pipelines and releases. Releases is still unchanged. Pipelines is replacing the builds, but pipelines is actually now also everything.
Yes. So in the end, it will probably also substitute the releases thing.
I'm guessing that will be the fact, but for now, not everything is on par yet. So it's next to each other.
Yeah.
There are a lot of templates in here. So you can just use a starter template to create a YAML file, because creating YAML is hard, apparently, especially if you make a small mistake, nothing works. So what you could do is click on the ASP.NET Core and it will create this wonderful build pipeline. This is a bit simple. I'm gonna zoom in for a bit. All that it does is it triggers on master for the build agent itself. It will run it on a new hosted Ubuntu VM image. And I'm having some variables here, release. I do a .NET build with the release and that's it. Display name is what you see in your logs. This is nice, this is fine, but if you want to do a real project multi-stage release pipeline, you need a bit more than this. So actually what you need to do is instead of going just right into steps, you can go instead of steps, I'm just going to remove this bit. You can go into, you can create an intro that is stages, and then you can start a stage. The stage is called build, the first one. And in this build stage, we want to actually build what we did before. So in this build stage, we will start a job or multiple jobs. Actually, you can start where you could do there, of course, your build and your testing. And this is just the first phase of your app. So it's same thing, just a script, .NET build. What I added is a publish. So what it does is publish it in the output directory or in the artifact staging directory. And what I actually want to do next to that is really publish it as an artifact. So first thing is copying it out and then just publish. So much for our build stage. This would work fine.
Yeah, and then if
normally,
I'm not mistaken, I'm not sure if you're going to touch on that later, but if I'm not mistaken, the stages thing is so that you have different stages, and then the jobs also can have multiple jobs, but it could also only have just one, right? And then you could right away add the tasks under. And then also you have the dependencies that you can define on the multi-stage, where you say, well, stage 1 needs to be done and
yeah, you have to
checked.
depends
Okay.
on, you have conditions, multiple things, and on all levels you can actually add templates as well, because you can imagine you will have, if you have multiple apps, you will reuse some stuff, and stuff will get large and complicated fast. So you have the option to add templates. In this case, I'm actually gonna add another stage, and the stage is gonna be the deployment. And I'm just pasting it in also, just for magic of TV. Go a bit faster. Next stage, what I want to do is deploy to development environment. Indeed, what you mentioned is it depends on the build. So it's not going to be in parallel or anything. Like, you really need to wait for the build. That is one of the conditions before it starts. And then you could, what I want to do is add a deployment. And because you can add multiple, you have multiple options here as well. This is for the jobs. Let me see, no suggestions. Yeah. So you can add a job directly underneath the stage, like we do actually in the build. But what we can also do is deployment. And then you can say our deployment is going to the development environment. An environment, as you can see on the left, you can define. So it says environment, and we say, well, dev, simple. And what we're going to do is then you have the options of multiple strategies. For this one, I'm just going to do a simple run once strategy. You have all kinds of tricks in there, but for a simple app like this, run once works fine. And I'm going to add a deploy step. And the deploy step actually just needs steps, and underneath the steps you can add tasks. So these are all the tasks you're used to. What you can do, of course, is on the right side. That's a little trick, not to have to remember everything. Get the tasks from the task library you're used to. So what we want to do here is do a deployment task. And there are some new tasks in there these days, because what I read was that the old one was getting out of hand. The old web app deploy was too multifunctional, also for functions and for Linux and for Windows. So this is an actual only a web app deployment. I think this one isn't even compatible with the publish, the old school publish file, which you can create from Visual Studio. There's a small difference there. So what I say to this deploy step is like, well, look in this artifact. This is the pipeline workspace, and the artifact's name is drop. It's the drop folder. All the files that you have to deploy are going in there. As you can see, I defined some variables in here. So, or I used some of the variables. I'm just gonna paste them in on top to define what I'm going to do. So release pipeline is the resource group where I want to go to, and this is a service plan, and this is the app name. I defined these two because I actually want to, and I'm maybe going into this in another talk or later. I'm going to add actually the creation of this environment for my app. So I'm just going to add a pre-deploy step. I want to do this before I do the deploy. And I'm just gonna paste some magic in. Just a sec.
That's the hardest part, right? Having the right magic to paste in.
The right magic to paste in. Yeah, it's like it's just pressing buttons, just pressing the right buttons at the right time. That's our work, right?
Yes.
Talking about that. So this is using the CLI. So it's a CLI inline script. So it does a resource group create, app service plan create, and then it creates a web app. Trick, you need to pass the runtime, and I'm running in PowerShell right now, and this pipe symbol can be a bit of a bastard because in script, normally, you also see him here, it has a certain meaning. By adding this %, after some Googling, it no longer broke.
But that probably wasn't the first link you clicked when you were Googling it.
No, that I'm not going to say how long that took me. Too long, but it was night. So what you can see now, I have a pre-deploy, a deploy, and a build job. Everything's in there. So I'm just going to save and run this. The nice thing about the YAML builds is actually that they're part of your repository. And because of that, you can share them, copy them easily, move them, have version control on them, but also this is, yeah, what I want to say, I don't know. I'm just distracted right now. It's building. So we can see we have now a build and a deploy stage.
Yep.
The build stage is not started because it needs permissions to run, because this is the first time we created it. And the deploy stage is also not started. So what I actually want to go in now first, because we have a dev deploy and we want probably a test environment or QA environment, and maybe a production deploy, production canary deploy, but you don't want them to just run after the previous one. What you actually want is some control about releasing this actually to a next environment.
Yeah, like we had with the
we had pre and post approvals in release.
Yeah, the pre and post build step approvals.
Yes, and the trick I did is adding the environment, if you can remember. And what it actually did is already created this environment by kicking off the build for the first time. Yeah. So it's now needing an approval or permission to actually run the first time. So it's already blocked. Yep. But it already created the environments that the whole pipeline is requesting. So in this case, I only have dev. I'm going into that environment right now. And here I can add approvals and checks. You can invoke a function or run a test or anything. In this case, I would just want manual approval. So that is like the approval pre-check that we had. Like I want to, and you can put a group in here, would be better, to actually approve. And you have some conditional options, a timeout when it crashes. And you can disable the allow approving your own stuff. I'm not going to disable this now because I'm the only user in the repo, so yeah, that would be complicated.
That's going to make it hard.
Yeah, that's.
But then also the cool thing about the fact that you have the checks and approvals here instead of inside of your YAML file is, of course, that the YAML file is part of code, and then the code could be edited by anybody that has access to the repo. While having the environment available here that holds the checks and approvals makes that you can have the checks and approvals be managed by somebody that actually has the right access rights to do so.
In a small team, it's simple, but like if you go larger and it's a bit more serious, then I can imagine you want some more control, and that control is separate. You don't want your junior dev to edit this. You definitely want your junior dev to build the pipeline for you. But maybe only members of the ops team or actually a different team will approve this for production or for QA. Maybe you just want your testers to approve it before they get new stuff all day.
Yeah, and then one question I would have is, I mean, in your pipeline, you now create the environment from the pipeline. Would it also be possible to have the pipeline you're using come from a template that a developer cannot access, or at least cannot edit or modify?
Yeah, what you can do is have a template from an external repository. Okay. I actually have an example of that if you want to see that quickly. Checking out the pipelines. Oh, they're running. Oh, I needed to approve it. Let's approve the first step, otherwise it won't do anything.
Yeah, and then at least it's running.
Yeah, at least it's starting to run. So it's gonna build now, and it will request an approval before it's going to deploy stuff in Azure. Switch repos quickly. I have a template example.
Okay, so while you're switching repos, you said it actually needs approval for the first time it wants to create an environment or do something in the Azure subscription.
It needs an approval to run the first time, to run the pipeline, because it's using the pipeline is using my connection to the Azure portal, for instance. So
Yeah.
the first time you change agents or build pools, the first time you change something significant like using other hardware. It's like going into Azure with a different subscription or going into a different build pool, for instance. That will trigger a first time approval for that build.
So if you would add me to the repo that we just saw, and I create a new pipeline where I create a new environment, will that new pipeline be also asking permission the first time it runs, or will that lift on the existing credentials?
A new pipeline will ask that again. And the nice
That's
part
a good
is
thing.
that
It's a
thing
good thing.
is actually also, you can set that, who can do that. So you can also prevent all your developers doing that. So they cannot allow that the first time.
Otherwise, we're getting a Oscar environment and a Rick environment and then an Oscar and Rick environment and then a Rick environment too, because I had this, the first
Definitely
one,
don't want
but
that.
I missed it.
Really good. I'm switching to my browser right now. I prepared this actually. I'm gonna move this out till here. I'm just gonna show you what you can do. I'm just gonna uncomment it. So what you can do is add resources to your pipeline.
Yeah.
That's external resources. There are some options, but let's say we have a different repository. We're going to call it templates in this. So the repository name is for this context. The repository is how it's called. And this is the actual repo, Git repo name in our Azure DevOps environment. And then you can define which branch it takes. And then further on, if you say stages, for instance, I say, well, want to use template for stages, and I name the path of the file, it's in root, and we have an @ sign of this templates. So like you can see, just leave it for now. If I go into the templates, I have an example template here, which is also steps. So the template that you use and where you put it in is also the first element in the YAML file.
Okay. So it knows what to substitute. Yeah.
So you could say, well, this repo is not writable for your devs, but it is usable in the pipeline.
That's very valuable.
That's really cool, right? So let's see. For now, just to see the approval. We have a build. The build is complete. We have an artifact that it published. You can also see the steps here for the build. It's only asking for the deployment. It will say, do you want to review this? I can reject or approve. I'm now approving it. This thing will start doing the pre-deploy. So it's going to create a resource group. It's going to create application store or app service plan, and it's going to create the web app. After that, it's going to push the web app to that, and we can just click the link in the portal, and it exists. And the nice thing about using the CLI like this is idempotent. So even though I'm running it the second time, it won't have any errors or whatever, because it knows how it's this exactly how you defined it. So I'm not going to do anything with it. So it will just skip over it. It will cost some time. So that's the only thing. But you can run this over and over and over again, just define it in your pipeline. So in this way, we have a multi-stage pipeline with creation on Azure of your resources within, what is it, 10 minutes, 15 minutes?
Yeah, and then the cool thing is that, exactly as you said, it manages all the artifacts or all the resources in Azure that you need, and it updates them if you change anything in whatever's in the CLI. But then that would as far as I'm concerned, that's awesome, right? Because we're using infrastructure as code, and then you have also that under version control, so we exactly know what happens and what changed when and by who. But then my question would be, if now you would start a new Azure project with a CI/CD pipeline, would you use ARM templates or would you use CLI and do it this way?
I'm gonna compare both of them, and maybe it's gonna be a video or at least a blog, because I really want to put them side by side. The ARM templates are just exportable, so really easy to use. But on the other hand, like with 3 lines of code in the CLI, I'm really powerful. And as a coder, somehow I feel a bit more leaning to that one.
And then again, I mean, the 3 lines of CLI code are probably 37 lines of ARM template. Right?
Yeah, because it has all the details.
Yes.
So let's get into that one later. For now, I'm just going to share my browser. This said it all worked. I actually went into Azure already, and indeed created all this, and it created an app. And if I didn't screw it up, it will actually host something. Yes, also this got created just right now.
This is awesome.
This is pretty awesome, right? So
yeah,
that's it for me.
Cool.
I hope you enjoyed it.
I did. It's actually very cool stuff. I love the fact that you use the templates to pull them in from even external repos if you want to. So that's a nice thing. I'm really looking forward to your comparison of both ARM and CLI, because I get mixed messages about what people think about them. So I'm really curious what your take on it will be. And I would also like to say that we're going to do something similar like what we did here today, but then on GitHub Actions.
Yeah, because it's similar, right?
Yeah,
really like
similar and it's different. So I think we need to compare the two as well, and then we'll do one on GitHub Actions later.
That's really cool. You know more about that one, so you tell me how that works. I'm looking forward.
Well, thanks, man. Don't put the pressure on me.
No, I would never do. I think this was it for this time from home.
Yep.
Hope it wasn't too bad. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
I did too. Thanks, man.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
See you next time.
See you next time.